Hello and welcome. We're discussing opening the register, how to handle disclosure of gamete donor information. The hashtag for this event is #PetDonor, and this event has been made possible thanks to the kind support of the Scottish Government. I'm Sarah Norcross, Director of PET, and I'm chairing this discussion. Now, back in the early noughties, court cases, consultations, column inches of debate led, albeit after much prevarication and delay, to the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority disclosure of donor information regulations in 2004. And this law abolished donor anonymity going forward in the UK and led to the introduction of what we call identity release egg, sperm, and embryo donors in the UK. And in October 2023, some people who were conceived from donor gametes in the UK, where the relevant sperm or eggs were donated after the UK abolition of donor anonymity came into force, will reach the age of 18. And from this point forward, a growing number of donor-conceived people will be officially entitled to ask the UK's fertility regulator, the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority, the HFEA, for their donor's full name, their date of birth, and their last known address. So, are we ready? After 18 years, are we prepared? Everyone that I have spoken to, from patient support groups, from donor support groups, from the regulator to the professional bodies, wants this to work well. They want it to work well for donor-conceived people and their families, and also for the donors and their families. And many of you will have noticed that the HFEA launched a campaign to raise awareness of the changing situation and to encourage donors to ensure that they're contactable. And this entails the donor providing their up-to-date contact details to the clinic where they donated or to the regulator, to the HFEA themselves. And I was really pleased to see that the campaign got lots of media coverage. One of tonight's speakers was talking about it on Radio 4's flagship Today programme. So let's hope it has made an impact. We have a great panel lined up for you this evening. We have Rachel Cutting, Laura Bridgens, Rebekah Dundas, and Nina Barnsley. Rachel is the Director of Compliance and Information at the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority.
So just to start with, I'm just going to briefly introduce the service that we have at the HFEA. So it's focused around the register that we hold. So when the HFEA came into existence in 1991, one of the remits was for us to collect any information about all treatments that were conducted in the UK. That included IVF cycles, and related to this, it included all cycles where donation was involved, and it also included collecting information about any live births that were through treatment or donation. So this means that there are certain people that can access this information from our register. So post 1991, that means donor-conceived children, parents, and donors. Unfortunately, the HFEA doesn't have a remit outside of the UK, so we can't provide any information to those that have used donation services outside of the UK, or if you've had treatment that's been through unregulated donations, that means private sperm arrangements or outside of a licensed clinic. And also, if you were conceived by donation pre-1991, we don't have the records to do with any of those treatments. And I know I'm sure Laura will talk about DCR, so I'm not going to talk about that at the moment. So we have an established service at the HFEA called Opening the Register, and you can find more information about that on the HFEA website. It is an established service. It first started giving information out to donors and parents in 2005 and donor-conceived people from 2007. And although we're excited about 2023 and the change of the law in 2005, we have actually already given out identifiable information about donors to donor-conceived people. And that's because some donors have chosen, before they'd donated before 2005, to re-register as identifiable information. The information that we've got on the website explains the process. It talks about some of the implications people might think about if they're going to access information. And it also gives information about the support and the partners that we would focus on and pinpoint to, such as DCM, which Nina is going to talk about later on. So what information can be got through the HFEA? So it depends on the age to start with. So from the age of 16, you can find out non-identifying information about the donor that's on the register. So at 16, you can find out through the HFEA if they're donor conceived, non-identifying information such as the number and sex of any half siblings that have been born through donation. Also, if their donor is anonymous or identifiable, as I said, they've got quite a few donors. I think there's over 300 now that have re-registered as identifiable, and if they might be related to an intended spouse or partner. At 18 now, since the law changed in 2005, it means that identifiable information is being able to be given out. And you can also at this age join the donor sibling link as well. So non-identifying information that is available from the age of 16 includes physical characteristics such as interest, occupations, hair colour, eye colour, and it also might say about any children and the year of birth. More recently, donors can provide a pen portrait and goodwill message, and that gives a description of themselves and a message to the parents and child. As an embryologist, I was involved in the donor programme that we had at my clinic, and I've also done a recent audit of the goodwill and pen portrait messages. And sometimes it really does make you quite emotional reading them, because the messages that donors put in there are from the heart and really do explain why they want to help create families. So the identifiable information that we're now able to give out includes the current and previous names of the donor, the date of birth, place and country of birth. And the important thing to note in the law, it does mean that we have to give out the last known postal address. And I'll go on to explain some of the implications around that later on. And it also allows the pen portrait and goodwill message an unredacted copy of that if there is any additional information than the anonymous information to go out. At 18, anybody conceived through donor treatment can join the donor sibling link. And to do that, you make an application through the HFEA website. We check the register, and then we can match siblings together. We've got over 60 matches at the moment. They can be just single groups, just one siblings, or they can be a multiple group of siblings. We also share where people can find support, and we also offer what's called an intermediary service. So if you know that you've got a donor sibling, you might not want to release your identifiable information out straight away. You might want to message anonymously the sibling a few times to get to know someone before you want to take that step further. And that's something that we offer through the support service at the HFEA. So 2023, as Sarah said earlier, in 2005, this was a huge change, a very positive step forward to be able to release identifiable information. So the first step, if you're thinking of finding information about your donor, is to go to the HFEA website. Identifiable information can only be released through going through the HFEA. There's lots of information, good information on the HFEA website about that, about how the process works, and also about implications to think through if you are thinking about gaining that information. For example, if your donor doesn't want to have any contact with you, or you can't find the donor that you thought you were going to be able to have contact with. I'll talk about what improvements we've made and the project work that we've been doing as well. On the website, we do signpost to the support services and DCN and other resources where people can find support. It's obviously a huge thing to do to be able to gain this information, and it's right that you can talk this through and have support whilst doing it. So how it works at the HFEA, we've got a secure online process where you would upload a passport or a driving licence, ideally passport, through something called DocuSign, so that we can check the identity of the person applying. We then check the register to find where the treatment was and who took place, so we can check the donor codes that we've got. We then, because it's absolutely important to give the correct information out, we would go back to the clinic where the treatment took place to ask the clinic to check the details. We've then got a double check-in system in place, exactly like you would in a clinic with witnessing. So we get 2 members of staff to double check the information before we provide that information to the applicant. And this is the same process whether it's a donor, parent, donor conceived individual. The only slight difference in the process when we release donor identifiable information is we still do the same checks, but we will notify a donor when we get the first application for identifiable information. And we will write to the donor to say that we are going to release the identifiable information, remind them what that is, and also to signpost support services to them. 18 years ago is a long time for a lot of us, and donors who donated 18 years ago, their personal circumstances may have changed now, and they may be in a relationship where they haven't told their partner that they were perhaps a donor. So we want to make sure that there's support then for them as well. We also in the letter say to donors that the law says that we have to release the last known postal address. But we know that addresses and writing isn't always what people want to do, especially if they're young adults. So we ask the donor if they want to provide an email address or a phone number, and say if that's their preferred method of contact. And we can release this alongside the address to the donor conceived individual and say, your donor would prefer you to contact them via this. And hopefully that way we can make successful connections. It has been a priority, absolute priority, getting ready for 2023, although, as I've said, we have had a well-established service and we have released identifiable information over the several years. But we do anticipate an increase in applications, especially because we are doing the communication strategy and the comms at the moment around this. So we do expect to have more donor-conceived individuals applying, parents, identifiable donors that we need to contact. But one of the things that's also happened, and we have seen this, is that people pre-2005 being made aware of the importance of having identifiable information to pass on to a donor-conceived person are re-registering as identifiable. And then we also have increased applications to the donor sibling link. So at the start of this year, we made 3 priorities. One was looking at the OTR service as a whole, more the operational aspects of the service, to make sure that we had the staff and systems in place to be able to deal with the inquiries that we were getting. We also wanted to look at the support service that we offer. Currently, we fund a service through the Hewitt Fertility where they provide counselling sessions. But what we wanted to do was look at the different types of support available, think of how we can make this financially secure in the future and viable, but also the different types of support, such as peer support. Sarah's mentioned we've launched our Who is My Donor campaign, and the communications around this is absolutely critical to raise awareness of how someone can apply for information, but also to reach out to those donors so that they can contact their clinic to update their address. So in a little bit more detail, in the OTR team, what we've done is we've developed internal policies and procedures, we've increased the number of staff in the team, and we've also invested in a new IT case management service system, which makes it a lot more effective and time effective to be able to process the applications. We've also just recently completed what we call the register tools. Many of you on the meeting this evening will know that we've had a new register called Prism, and we've had to rebuild the jigsaw around that to be able to extract the data from the register. And we're in testing phase at the moment of those. And again, that will make it a lot more efficient process once we've got those in place. Project to look at the support services is ongoing. We've held roundtables with key stakeholders to discuss the type of support that might be most beneficial. We've also done an online survey and looked across international comparators to see what's being offered, and we will report back in November and January to the HFEA authority members for them to make a decision to where we go in the future of this. I just thought I would put a few messages from those that have made applications through the OTR system. Very often they're very grateful and appreciative of how we've sensitively handled the process, and the information that we do provide to them really does change lives.
Our next speaker is Laura Bridgens, and Laura is a donor-conceived person. She's director of the newly established organisation Donor Conceived UK, and she is co-chair of the Donor Conceived Register's registrants.
We are in the process of establishing a new peer-led charitable organisation to represent donor-conceived people, donors and others affected by donor-conceived practices in the UK. I'm also the chair of the Donor Conceived Register, and this is the evolution of the community that has basically grown around the registrants of the Donor Conceived Register. So that's donor-conceived people and donors. But being known as the Donor Conceived Register, or the DCR, is hindering easy access to the peer support available. And we receive and welcome people from any era. We have just launched a mini site to outline our ambitions and fundraising intentions as Donor Conceived UK. And you can see the domain along the bottom of the screen there. Now, I am a late discovery donor conceived adult, and I imagine I've been asked to speak today due to my lived experience of being donor conceived, and to speak a little about the consultation process that we ran at the start of the year. The whole concept for Donor Conceived UK is built around a desire to enable the best possible outcomes for donor conceived people, and how the disclosure of gamete information is handled is key to achieving this. In my time today, I will cover the significance of 2023 and the disclosure of donor information in the context of the wider donor-conceived community, the most relevant headlines from the consultation, and I'll also outline support need themes for the donor-conceived community. Now, I want to start by stating this fact. For an individual to be applying for identifying information via the HFEA, they need to know that they are donor-conceived. Disclosure is not required by law. And donor-conceived people whose parents are not signed up to the donor-conceived network ethos of openness and transparency are highly likely to also be late discovery, like me. A meta-analysis of 2016 concluded that the probability of legal parents in the UK disclosing to their children that they are donor-conceived was less than 50%. Now, all this attention on the 2023 cohort must teach us not to lose sight of the retrospective agenda when discussing support needs for donor-conceived people and historic donors. This up on the screen now is the conclusion of Sophie Zadair's recent research, What are the support needs of donor-conceived individuals who are searching for or open to matching genetic connections? She says that the impact of legal and technological changes, such as direct-to-consumer DNA testing and the legal transition to identifiable donation, may be felt by donor-conceived individuals irrespective of their year of birth. the wishes of donor-conceived individuals for different support resources should be borne in mind by practitioners, regulatory bodies, and policymakers going forward. I'd actually like to pose the question, how different actually are the cohort of 2023 onwards from the rest of us? For example, even for this identifiable donor cohort, there is no legal obligation to interact with a donor-conceived person if they do reach out. There's only been minimal 11th hour preparation for historical donors impacted by the law change, but the idea of anonymity is defunct anyway, and historical donors of all eras will need support with potential contact. And this support needs to be available for life, and not just now while there's all this hype around the 2023 cohort. So I don't have much time in my 10 minutes to share much here, but we did run a consultation at the beginning of this year, and the report will be available quite soon on our mini site. We intend to build an organisation around 3 pillars of support, education, and advocacy, and we'll have a strong mental health focus. We have ambitions to become a charitable incorporated organisation in 2024, and this will allow us to create a community who wish to become part of the solution for the future support needs of donors, donor-conceived people, and others intergenerationally affected. Now, 2 of the main themes that came out of the consultation process around the subject of support were to embed this strong mental health presence and also to expand on the support offer available. We are hearing that this community needs something systematically different. While still recognising the value of one-to-one counselling, we have ambitions for a raft of multidisciplinary tools, resources, and peer-led events, both virtually and in person. Now, how do we intend to be part of the solution? It is our ambition to represent the users of the donor sibling link, the HFEA record service, and the OpenID cohort in the same way that we currently represent the users of the Donor Conceived Register as the chairs of the Donor Conceived Register Registrants Panel. We want to work with partners and stakeholders to improve online signposting, to ensure UK relevant support and high quality resources are easy to find, regardless of your era. And by transitioning the home of this DC community to its own dedicated organisation, rather than the same name as a service provider, while still retaining links and relationships with that service provider. And this will all benefit anyone that is intergenerationally affected. It needs to be made as easy as possible for people to find support and community from people who have lived experience. It can be lonely and isolating when you're searching for answers, for closure, for new beginnings, for acceptance, and for our experiences and feelings to be validated. The good news is that there is an existing active and supportive donor-conceived community in the UK, which is built up around the donor-conceived register. The community is managed and organised entirely by the co-chairs and other volunteers of the Donor Conceived Register Registrants Panel. It will make the community more accessible now it has found a new name and created its own brand identity to distinguish itself from the register and its associated service. As a community, we are not the register. I wanted to just highlight a couple of the areas of the donor-conceived experience. Learning your donor-conceived often creates a lot of questions without answers, which causes strain on mental health and well-being. And there's also an emotional and ethical labour for donor-conceived people, having to become non-professional intermediaries and gatekeepers of donor-conceived information. Even if you feel as though being donor-conceived doesn't affect your identity, you are likely to come into contact with half-siblings or other family members who might, and who may require support to deal with that scenario. Now, there are no donors on the panel to tell you how they feel, but I imagine they have similar worries. The donors within our community certainly speak of this experience really getting under their skin. On this slide, there's a few more of the areas of the donor-conceived experience. And I really feel that some of these can be slightly rewritten to describe possible historical donor experience or anybody else intergenerationally affected. For example, the psychological distress implications of large sibling groups is as much applicable to a donor's raised children as other donor-conceived people, and also for historical donors to suddenly be confronted with a huge amount of offspring. And they also, everybody involved needs help navigating how family dynamics may change over time or following a disclosure or discovery. These all feel quite relevant to the experience as a whole. So my closing statements are as follows. We really need acknowledgement of the relational entanglement legacy left by historical donor conception practices. Donor conception is a lifelong intergenerational process that has far-reaching social implications. Donor-conceived people and those affected by donor conception practices face unique challenges and require support and resources to navigate these challenges. A peer-led charitable organisation can provide understanding, empathy, information, signposting, resources, and support for these individuals. This is not an us and them scenario, and part of the work that needs to happen is to listen to the worries, fears, and experiences of the others affected by donations, such as the parents of donors, siblings of donors, raised children of donors, grandchildren of donors, spouses of donors, and non-biological parents involved, etc., etc. But there is an emphasis on the donor holding the key to the answers we seek as donor-conceived people, and the work we hope to do as Donor Conceived UK will aim to enable the best possible outcome for donor-conceived people.
Next this evening, we have Rebekah Dundas, and Rebekah is mother of 3 donor-conceived children, and she is a former member of the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority.
Some really interesting presentations so far. So as Sarah mentioned, I'm adding to that from the perspective of a parent of a DC teenagers. So love, not blood. So starts the introduction of my 15-year-old daughter Mary's school essay on family relationships and bonds, where she's trying to explain what it means for a DC young person and family relationships. For many young people turning 18 from October, opening the register may be part of their understanding of their family and where their blood relationships to their donor fits into this picture. My 3 teenagers were conceived at a clinic in Scotland with an anonymous donor, but will come of age at a time when their DC peers can apply to open the register and find out more about their donor. This talk is about our family and our lived experience as parents, with also some input from our teenagers, Matthew, Mary, and Angus. And I appreciate the opportunity to include the parents' voice and the teenage perspective in this discussion, and what is probably a niche angle of anonymous donors who are turning 18 at this time when others can open the register. Our family was conceived under the transitional arrangements that were included when anonymity was removed in 2005. This made a lot of sense at the time when there were real patients going through treatment using donor gametes, and there was an acute shortage of donor eggs and sperm to use in this treatment. The HFEA allowed a year up to March 2006 for the transitional arrangements, and I went through an IVF cycle in 2005, where the embryos were frozen for later use. Under the transitional arrangements, we were able to use these frozen embryos for my oldest son, Matthew, who was born in 2006 and is 17 in a few weeks, and for our twins, Mary and Angus, who were born in 2008 and are 15. Donor treatment was never really our first choice for having in a family, but it was our only option to have a child who would be related to one of us. Working through the fertility journey was challenging, like for so many, and took an extraordinary length of time and big decisions that we didn't take lightly. One of the positive steps was finding support groups, including DCN and in UK, who guided us through difficult times both before and after having children. From an early stage, when considering using donated gametes, we were clear that we would be open about this, because we knew if we were fortunate enough to have a child, we wanted to bring them up with the truth and openness, even if it was never going to be a complete picture. The consideration of whether to use anonymous donor sperm or not, and the implications of it when any child turned 18, was not really a consideration, as there were no willing to be known donors available at the clinic that we had been using for many years in Scotland. Our embryologist set it out for us that there was one donor that was working and one donor that was not working, and that was the choice. And that was the end of the story and the extent of the discussion about choice of donors. We were fortunate to have one super batch of embryos, and all 3 of our children came from these frosties. They've been brought up with the DCN book, My Story, from the very early days. We helped run a few DCN support group meetings in Scotland, so they've had the benefit of meeting other children who were donor conceived and heard about egg and sperm and double donation from an early age. And they also have friends who are adopted and family member who's fostered a teenager. So they understand a bit about the complexity of relationships. A DCN conference in Scotland included a workshop that our kids could go to, so they learned how to talk about their family. And this has proved helpful over the years, explaining that they have a dad, but they're not genetically related to him. They have not asked to open the register to see what information the HFEA holds about their donor. We've been upfront that it's very unlikely that there will be anything beyond basic non-identifying characteristics. At the clinic, we were given 6 facts about the donor: their height, build, hair and eye colour, blood group, and that the sperm came from Cryos in Denmark. Sadly, the information in the HFEA register is unlikely to include anything personal about the donor, about why they donated, or a goodwill message for any people created. I can clearly see that this, if done well, could be something powerful and important for donor-conceived people when they come to open the register. For our donor, the register might also hold their date of birth, ethnicity, and if they had children at the time of donation. Given that the donor is most likely to be Danish, we think it's unlikely that they would have known about the potential to re-register or that the current campaigns will reach them. As a parent, we've tried very carefully to manage the expectations of our teenagers about what information could be there if they apply to the HFEA to open the register, as we would hate them to build a narrative in their minds about what they could find out about their donor, only to be disappointed when they actually come to open the register. Any discussions we've had so far about opening the register have been relatively short, with my youngest son Angus thinking that one day he might ask the HFEA about the donor, but it's way down his list of interesting things to do. He's a golf addict who's also into other sports as well, so time is better spent doing those things at the moment. Mary has said that she might ask if she was considering a long-term relationship and she knew that the other person was donor conceived, and she might ask the HFEA if they were DC so that she would know she wasn't going to be related to them. And that would be her interest in opening the register. It would be about the relationship side. If anything, it might be the potential for donor-conceived genetically related half-siblings that triggers their interest. As we come from a very small family, they only have one cousin at the moment. There is the potential that up to 10 families use the same donor, so there could be half-siblings, and the HFEA register could hold some of their details, including number, age and sex of these genetically related half-donor siblings. Of course, we're also very aware that commercially available DNA testing could be an option for our young people at a later stage, and they've got friends who've used that, so are quite conversant in that. What I don't know is if the information in the HFEA register would have a full picture of any potential donor half-siblings, since the sperm came from Cryas in Denmark, which possibly adds another layer in that some of these half-siblings could live in the UK and potentially other countries as well. However, for our young people at this age and stage, their friends are currently more important to them than putting time into investigating others who might have used the same donor. When Matthew turns 18, it may be possible that he wants to do more to find out about donor-sibling link or do Google searches to see the advice that all young people who turn 18 after 2005 can find out about their donor when they're 18. That might lead them to doubt what we've been telling them. And like with so many things, and as the constant teenage refrain goes, assume that as parents, we know nothing. We fully understand the interest in the donor, and the register is likely to change over time at different ages and stages, and particularly if they have children of their own and think more about what being a parent involves and the impact of genetic roots. The challenge will come if one of our three develops a strong interest that they want to open the register and the others are not interested. This is clearly shared information, and in an ideal world, it would be informed, consensual agreement to take this next step. As a parent, I know at the moment that consensus isn't really in the teenagers' vocabulary, but perhaps in the future that might be the case. I do find it reassuring that there is support available to them if and when they decide to access the register, as even if they find some information about their donor, it'll potentially make them seem more real. But as they're anonymous, still out of reach, and there are clearly implications because of that. I believe that support for all involved in the donation process, from the donor to those who go through treatment, to parents of donor-conceived children, is really important. For young people and young adults, the support needs to reflect the age and stage that they are at, and is based, in my opinion, on openness, transparency, and advice at their different transition points. At the moment, our young people are confident acknowledging that they are donor conceived, understand that they have an anonymous donor, and that they're unlikely to know much about this generous person who gave them a gift of life. As a family, we discuss our links and relationships, and I hope share the values of respecting our shared heritage and stories. However, as Mary's trying to puzzle out in her essay, family relationships and bonds are often complex, and the inclusion of donor and donor half siblings clearly adds to this complexity. But we hope that a culture of openness and early conversations has helped her to come to a place where she's comfortable at this age and stage with these discussions, and that she'll be supported in future decisions about whether to open the register, undertake DNA testing, or join Donor Sibling Link or other future registers.
Our final speaker this evening is Nina Barnsley. Nina is director of the Donor Conception Network. She's got many, many years of experience now in this area. And she's also a member of the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority's Legislative Reform Advisory Group.
So, as Laura said, when the law changed in the UK in 2005, there was a sort of underlying assumption that people were going to tell their children, because what was the point of making donors identifiable at 18 if those children didn't know that they were donor conceived and had an identifiable donor? So I think it was a very positive move, and it built on the history of the Donor Conception Network's work on trying to promote openness and being able to talk about these issues more comfortably with children and with the wider network. We've always championed openness more on the basis of honesty being a good foundation for family life, rather than needing the law change or it relying on the fact that donors are identifiable. But I would also say that well, I don't know whether Rebekah really captured it, but because I think she's clearly very comfortable, and maybe that's taken a lot of work, I don't know. But for most people, it's not easy to talk about this, and people do need support in being open, and they need resources. And that's partly where we come in. It isn't always easy, and there are much bigger implications for being open. If you're going to start talking about these issues, then other issues come up, some of which have been described. So I think the way we'd see it at DC Network is that no one is an island, that children are not independent of their families and their parents. They sit within their families and within the wider community. We would see that parents are the decision makers here. So they're the ones that decide what donor to use, where to have treatment, what sort of legal framework they're going to be working under, when to tell and how to tell. So they're making all of those decisions on behalf of their children. I'd also say that within the home, they're the conversation leaders. They're the ones that set the tone around what can be discussed, how comfortable people can feel in talking about issues that are challenging maybe. And children will sense whether parents are comfortable, what's taboo, what's okay, what's not okay. And so we tend to put quite a lot of emphasis on parents, and we place responsibility on their shoulders for creating that climate of openness, that space in the family where these kind of issues can be talked about, and support can be started from the family unit rather than necessarily from professionals or even peer support outside of the family. What we're aiming for is a climate of openness rather than a sort of moment of telling. So telling rather than it being a single event. There is, I guess, that first moment when you tell, but then actually what you're doing is you're starting a conversation, and you're recognizing that conversation is going to change with your child as the child grows up. And the donor has a similar sort of version of that story. They also need to be open. They need to be talking with their family, and certainly telling their children and any other members, close family members that might need to know. So reflecting some of what Laura was talking about, I think although we do see that this is a significant moment, 2023 coincides with our 30th anniversary, which is rather nice. But I think we would see that whatever the framework people have conceived under, and whatever processes and protocols are available to them, that the key issue is that people need to know. I think the other way that I've tried to think about this is to think about the process that people go through. And I think I've tried to break it down. There's sort of five stages, 5 stepping stones. So in terms of disclosure. So the first thing is that people need to know if they're donor conceived. So that's just a fact. The second thing is that there might be some details about the donor or information about whether half siblings have also been created. And so that's just kind of a second step in terms of information that's available and how that might be disclosed. So the timing of that might be different. What information parents bring in when might vary over time, and it might depend on how confident the parents are, but also how the tone of the conversation's going, the curiosity of the child. Then you might hit a point, as we've hit now, where actually there is another stepping stone. So children turning 18, becoming adults, suddenly get access to further information, and they can have more information disclosed about either the donor or half siblings. And of course, other children will have that perhaps blocked, or that might come at a different stage, because it's possible that those connections may have been made through DNA testing or some other route prior to the child turning 18. So that's the kind of contact information, more information becoming available. Then from that, there's a decision on what to do with that information. Are connections going to be made? Are children going to reach out to either their donor or the half siblings? And is that going to be reaching out just in a quite a distant way? Is it just asking for information? Or is actually the intention or the wish to meet up and have some kind of actual in-person event? And then from that is the question around building relationships. So who are these people? And there might be a stepping stone where actually what might be called really meaningful relationships form, and these become something new in the family and new in the person's life. So it's not necessarily that all of those steps would complete, that's not the direction of travel and the objective, but all those steps, they lead from one to the other, and they all might be relevant in terms of how disclosure is made and how people feel about that information, what they want to do with it. So I think throughout the whole of that process, through all of those stepping stones, we've got a balancing act between the information that's available and shared and when and how that's done, the interest levels and whether children actually are expressing any interest at all, lots of interest, and then the importance that they're placing on this information. And that is partly tied in with the what, when, and how of disclosure. So how they've been talked about, how this issue has been talked about in the family, when it's been raised, and what information is actually available to give them. As we've seen, curiosity levels really vary. So Rebekah was talking about her children, not that interested, certainly not at the moment. That may change. Whereas I suspect that a lot of the people that Laura speaks to, and certainly a lot of the people that we've spoken to at the network, are very curious. And we also recognise that hope, in a way, we hope that teenagers have got more interesting and more important things in their lives than immediately reaching out to the HFEA to get information about their donor. But we certainly recognise that there are other points when it can become really pertinent. So if there are health issues, medical issues, having children of your own, having relationships, as Rebekah was saying, just being cautious around that. I think we'd also recognise that, as has been mentioned, really, that individuals can have very different feelings about this, and it's important to recognise that and try and create a space, or we're trying to create a space where whatever people feel, there's a place for them to go, and there are people that they can share that with. And included in that will be people where they are having to make connections outside of this legal framework, so not just within the HFEA's channels, but perhaps using alternative routes. And the whole thing, I think somebody already in one of their presentations said, managing expectations. I mean, that is a huge part of this. It's what people want and what the reality actually transpires to be. And those two things don't always marry up, sometimes in a positive way, sometimes in a neutral way, sometimes in a negative way. So just to give some other scenarios to flesh out what we've heard this evening, I should say, I think we see a lot of people who had not planned to tell. Whether they told the clinic that or not, I don't know, but they hadn't planned to tell, and they come to us later on because they do want to tell. And this also signifies that there is this transformation. Things can change, and we always think it's a very positive move when parents come to us having changed their mind, whatever age their children are, because then they're leading that conversation in the way that I was trying to describe at the beginning, that the responsibility is on the parents, that we're looking at this in the context of a family rather than an individual on their own. So we've got lots and lots of support available to people who are planning to tell a bit later than what might be ideal, right the way up to parents of children, I call them children, but children who are in their 40s. We've also got lots of different situations, like Rebekah's perfect example there. They're 3 children, all conceived with the same donor. What happens if one of them decides that they want to pursue the information and one of them is really adamantly anti that? How do you navigate that? We have other families where they've had to address that issue. And I think there can be a lot of confliction around a curiosity. So children might feel curious, or donor conceived people might feel curious. They don't want to perhaps upset their parents, so they don't want to express that curiosity. They don't want to upset the family. Perhaps they don't want to intrude in the donor's family. They don't know what they're going to meet up with when they reach out to this donor. Who is this person? What's the context of their life? Similarly with half siblings, so there can be lots of mixed feelings around this. And what we need is places where people can go, bring those complex scenarios, complex feelings, and explore them in more detail to work out what the next step on that stepping stone should be. And finally, there are so many people involved in this; it does get complicated. We had contact with the mother of a sperm donor. So this would be effectively the biological grandparents of the children that he'd helped create. She knew there were children created. He'd confirmed that. He and his wife had no interest in pursuing any information and didn't intend to make any contact, ideally. But his mother was very curious, really wanted to reach out and find these children. And of course, that is not, there's a I think that's probably reflects some of what Sarah was talking about my complicated network of people that might be interested in that these children are connected with. So just to sort of, clarify that there is complexity here. So to finish up, I think we're really looking at foundations and scaffolding. So what we want different models of support to build really good foundations. We want a climate of openness. That's the starting point. We need good information to be really easily available, and we want people to be making informed decisions. So that's the parents, because they are the first decision makers in all of this, and I suppose the donors in their context. And around that, we want some scaffolding of really good support networks, professional support where needed, so that actually those parents can be really confident in what they're doing. That may take time to build that confidence, but from that confidence will come confident families. And with any luck, those children will therefore end up being secure in who they are, regardless of whether they pursue information or not, regardless of whether they have access to information or not, that supportive, warm umbrella of the family will be very protective, whatever life throws at them. I think we want to make sure that there is an easy access to information and the appropriate support, peer support available, probably people who've been through similar experiences, so that they can share, they can listen, they can guide, take care of each other where needed. But all of that under this umbrella of a wider family unit. And just to really reiterate that we at DC Network, but we think it's wider than that, want to really be there for all families engaging in this process, regardless of what kind of donor they've used, what era they've conceived in, and what their particular situation and circumstances. It's really important to be there for everybody.
What is the anticipated response time that the HFEA have for any donor-conceived people who do decide to ask for identifying information from October onwards? It's been suggested in some circles that it's going to be 8 months plus, which I'm sure, if this is correct, many people who would consider this an unacceptable period of time for a young person to wait. So Rachel, is the rumour mill got this right, or are they wrong as usual?
During COVID, we had to suspend the service of opening the register because part of the process is going back to clinics to check the information, and staff weren't in clinics were closed. So we ended up having a backlog and a waiting list for anybody applying for information, which does still stand at the moment. So there are longer waiting times than we would like at the moment. But what we've done is invested in the new support system, in the new case management system, invested in new staff and increased the number of staff that we've got in the team. So we are working through that backlog, and it will get better in the future, but it's not something that can be provided straight away because of this check-in process that we do have. So once we receive an application, we do give the clinic 28 days to find the information and come back to us, and then we do the second check-in. And we also obviously write into a donor as well. So it's not something that we release immediately. And we are aware that there is a waiting list, but we are doing everything we can to bring that down.
Implications counselling is phenomenally helpful, and I think the starting point for it is the openness and transparency and sharing good resources like what the Donor Conception Network and other support groups have. So that really was something that was phenomenally helpful for us, and we were able to share it with other family members as well, because as Laura and also Nina have touched on, there's so many others in this complex family web that are involved, whether it's grandparents, the genetically linked grandparent to our children had some concerns, and we were able to share DCN leaflets with them and use it as a route for talking through this complex situation that we were in, and what it meant for them for not being genetically related to their grandchildren. So openness, transparency, lots of advice, and that advice being different at different ages and stages, the transition points that I mentioned in my presentation.
The implications counselling process is not a gatekeeping exercise where they have to say the right things to get you to tick the right boxes so that they're allowed to pursue their option for having a baby. And we know that some people feel like that. So I think that would be a really good message that the clinic could get out there. It's not that gatekeeping exercise. And I think the other thing is to take the pressure off the counsellors to some degree. You know, they often only get an hour or maybe a few hours with a patient to go through a huge amount of information and thinking, and to just remember that there is there are other places, not just DC Network, but DC Network is a great place to go. We can pick up some of that conversation, that conversation can continue over time. You don't have to get it all done in that 1 hour session with that patient, because I think that can be just such a huge pressure, we know.
Emily Engel has a problem which was touched on, I think, by both Rebekah and then by Nina about, and Emily asked, what plans are there to protect or not under 18s whose older siblings or half siblings are obtaining their donor information? Because that's a sort of invidious position. The HFEA can't do anything about the fact you're 18 or 19 and you've got a 16-year-old sibling. So what, if anything, can be done about that? Perhaps we'll go to Rachel first to explain the situation from the regulator's point of view, and then we'll come into Nina and Rebekah.
Yeah, I mean, from a regulator's point of view, we uphold the law. We don't write the law, we uphold the law. And we're obviously able from the age of 18, and not everybody will choose to apply for their information. But at 18, from that point, they can apply. And we won't be able to prevent anybody from getting that information if they've got a younger sibling. What we would do is obviously signpost to support services and to Nina and Laura and other organisations to help the family cope with that. But there are also many other ways that you can find out inadvertently that you are donor conceived. And one of those is, you know, the DNA testing websites at the moment. So children may be finding out a lot younger anyway at the moment.
I don't think anything can be done to stop it happening. I mean, we would always, I think, go back to it being important that parents are involved in these conversations and are helping support their children with those decisions and with information that comes along or doesn't come, so that as a starting point. So within the family, the topic is being talked about, and if there are challenges and issues that come up, that it starts off in the family, and then of course, yes, if they need additional support if you actually need a space to think it through. What should we do in this difficult circumstance where our 18-year-old wants to pursue information, our 14-year-old doesn't, and is going to be, if the 18-year-old goes for it, then the 14-year-old will be exposed to that information whether they like it or not. To have a space to go to think through those issues. Could it be delayed? Do you need a bit more support? Is there a way that there might be lots of ways of navigating that, but I think it's a case of there isn't a way around it. There's no way to avoid it, I suppose, is my comment.
And I guess, Rebekah, that as a parent you'd say there isn't really a way to avoid it, but I just thought you might like to add something in here.
No, it is one of these potential conflict points that there is different rights and responsibilities there, and sometimes individuals' rights and responsibilities are conflicting at different ages and stages. And with a family, it's one of the additional things that becomes complex and challenging, and ideally you try and work through with communication. And it's absolutely right, young people are accessing DNA testing. Mary was sharing with me over the last week that her friends got DNA testing kits for Christmas and were doing them, and it seems that it's sort of a bit of a fad for 15-year-olds in this area to do DNA testing. It's sort of like, wow, the implications of that are really quite significant, but that's what young people have access to.
From what I know about the community, this is quite common, that within family units, different elements are disclosed. There are a lot of secrets still going on, so it's not unusual for people to find their donor and not tell their parents. It's not unusual for historical donors to meet up with donor-conceived people and not tell their raised children or wives. This all happens. This is all people that were there on Saturday. Lots of people, there are people that had come with their donors and their parents had no idea they'd even found them. And yes, there are families where some siblings are bothered and some are not. So it's something that even when people are in their 40s and the donors are older, it's definitely just one of those things. It's part of the donor conceived experience, for sure, that complexity within family.
So for the next question, I'm going to go to Hayley from Hayley King, and she says, with the potential for rise in donors coming forward in the coming years, possibly seeking support and resources, are there any plans to increase provisions for these donors, bearing in mind the limited capability of the existing DCR funding and framework?
I find the whole concept of the donor conceived register quite confusing, and I'm the co-chair. So obviously it was set up for pre-91 donor conceived people and historical donors to voluntarily put themselves on a DNA register. And then there's associated counselling along with that. But the counselling service is the same counselling service that anybody who is donor conceived from any era can apply to have counselling with. But it's still under the DCR umbrella. So yeah, there's a little bit of disconnect over what things are called and who's eligible to apply for what. For example, I heard that you could be on the donor conceived register if you were born up to the year 2000. So that's obviously, something that isn't really in the original idea of the donor conceived register, which was very much for pre-91. So it's something that I think the whole provision really needs shaking up. And like I said in my presentation, it shouldn't be this hard to find the support that you need. So yeah, there's definitely something needs to happen with the signposting and the framework that makes it less confusing. Where the money comes from, I have no idea. We're obviously trying to raise some funds ourselves. We have no money. So yeah, we're right at the beginning of that journey. We're just trying with some imperfect action to make ourselves heard, really.
It's obviously very much on our radar, and we know that our families are looking for that support, and people are contacting us and joining the network, looking for that kind of support. So we're putting something in, we're doing our best to put something into place. We're also looking for funding, and it's not quite clear where we're going to get it from, but we're determined.
Currently, it's the HFEA that funds the support services, and we're a small organisation, and we've had to find this within our budget to do that. And what we are doing at the moment is looking how that we can make that service financially viable for us. It is difficult to see how many people may want that support service in the future, which is why we've sort of extended and done roundtables and done a survey, which we're just evaluating at the moment. One of the key things that came from the roundtables was the need for peer support, and it wasn't just about having counselling. And as Laura says, it's about having somewhere that signposts to good information and where that peer support can be met. So we are going back to the authority in November and January with some plans to discuss with them and to make some decisions about where we go in the future with that.
I was wondering what will happen when the donor has moved in the meantime and will not receive your mail. Your mail will be received by the new homeowner. In the Netherlands, there's a national institution where all updated addresses can be found, for example. That sounds like a marvelous system. I'm not aware of anything like that in the UK, but it's a question for you, really, Rachel.
To think about this, we need to go back to how the law was written in 2005, and that was that the last known postal address will be provided by the donor. So if you look at the information that was provided to donors at the time, it was that this is the information will be given out, your last known address that's with the clinic or with the register, and this was the donor's responsibility to update that with the clinic or the HFEA if the clinic was shut. So the donor hasn't consented to being traced and finding new addresses. I suppose in the UK, we do have like the NHS patient system where you can go in and find information, but donors' confidentiality and protecting the use of donor and not breaching GDPR is very important. We debated this very lengthily at the authority earlier this year, and if anybody does want to read the full paper, it really does go into a lot of detail to say why we almost unanimously agreed that we couldn't go and trace donors' addresses through any third-party systems, because we would be breaching how they consented at the time, we'd be breaching their GDPR, and potentially whoever is using that system to find the donor could actually be breaching and letting them know person through the search engine that they are a donor, and that's the reason why. So I would encourage, if anybody wants to look at that further and understand the reasons behind it, to all our authority papers are on the HFEA website, and have a read through the legal advice that we were given at the time.
Since the launch of the campaign, has there been an increase in donors revoking their donation?
We haven't had anybody saying that any donors have revoked their consent, but we have had inquiries through that from pre-2005 donors that are wanting to learn more about becoming identifiable, which I think is a really positive way of the clinics, a response to the campaign. Donors will be updated through clinics. It'll be interesting to touch base with some clinics who've recruited many donors to see if that has happened, and we can certainly evaluate the success of the campaign midway through to see how that's going.
I've spoken to several donor-conceived persons who found out that their open identity donor had died, or that he doesn't want to be contacted. Some of them want to contact the donor's children, their genetic half-siblings, to gain information about their genetic origin. Have you come across such wishes, and how do you support and advise these individuals?
Well, we have a group of quite a large number of donor conceived people who are connected with us, but we often also collaborate with the DCR, as was Laura's organisation, as is, to try and connect them with other people who've had a similar experience. It's hard to know what else to say. We can't obviously force those donors to be interested in contact if they really aren't. I mean, I think all it does to me is it flags the importance of counselling donors when they are donating and making sure that they're really aware, because obviously these individuals are clearly, you know, from way back before the law change, but that we know that some clinics are not giving donors proper counselling sessions to help them think through the implications of what they're doing, and this is a sort of scenario we really want to avoid. But yeah, I think it's a sad situation.
As Nina says, it's a really sad situation and very real for many donor-conceived people. It's hard, you know. It's a really hard situation to find yourself in, and you know, people have positive outcomes. People have some really sad stories connected to the donor-conceived stories, but the one thing that we can guarantee is that there are other people within the UK community that understand what you're going through, because it is felt that by the wider public it's not always quite understood. So yeah, it just needs, I'd hate to think these people are suffering alone, because, you know, our Facebook group and our community is so good at looking after other people in a similar situation that it's just ensuring they know that we're here.
Should clinics provide counselling support to the parents of donor-conceived people, former patients, whilst their children are accessing information about their donor / genetic half-siblings?
It's a tricky one, because I'm aware from a conversation I had with Nina the other day that actually, you know, a clinic there's not a lot of money generated from the use of donor gametes. So it's very unlikely that something like that would happen, especially so far down the line. But I do think that there needs to be some kind of framework, some kind of permanent organisation that's there to, you know, the trouble is we've got Donor Conception Network and what we're kind of trying to bring into the sphere, but we're charitable, you know, we're relying on funding the whole time. So it's tricky, but yeah, the resources need to be there, whether it's counselling support from the clinics. I'm not sure if they're best placed. I went to an event last year and none of the clinic staff there had even met a donor-conceived person. So yeah, I think possibly donor-conceived people might be better placed to navigate people through that than clinic staff.
I'm not sure the clinic where you went along to have treatment would be the right place or would have that skill set to do it. It's more peer-to-peer survivors of other parents who've been through it at these different transition points, and sharing that lived experience could actually be more helpful than a counsellor who primarily is speaking to parents at that point where they're looking to go through treatment, not dealing with the real life person at 18 who's got different choices and decisions to make.
Clinics do have an obligation to provide counselling before, during and after treatment. It does say in the Code of Practice that there is a requirement to provide that after treatment. So if a parent did come along several years later, maybe they wanted to have support in telling the child that they were donor conceived, or if it was to do with a child accessing information, then a clinic should be able to provide support to them. I'm sure that's something that Rebekah have spoken about. What
support or counselling services are available or being organised for donors and donors' families?
Yeah, I mean, we do the support service, and we do offer a support service for any donors that have either having identifiable information released or are considering re-registering as identifiable. But as we've said, you know, the HFEA is a small organisation with limited resources, so it's impossible to provide counselling to everybody that's involved. What we do find that what we spoke about earlier is the signposting to other support and peer support organisations like, DCN and DCR.
There isn't an organisation that is primarily focused on donors. At the moment, yes, as Rachel says, it's basically DCN and Laura's new organisation that is providing some level of support, but we're not focused on donors, and it's not ideal.
We have always had donors in the community. So that's not unusual we have experience of matching, sort of buddying up donors with other donors to be able to sort of share that lived experience.
What age would you recommend telling a child they were conceived via donor? My consultant for IUI said age 3 is the recommended age. Are there supporting materials, e.g. age-appropriate books?
We got a copy of My Story, the DCN book, for each of the children, and to make it easier for us as parents, we started reading the stories when they were babes in arms and couldn't really chat back at the time. So it helped us to practice using the words and the terms. And for the 3 of our children, they say they never knew anything other than these books were around, and then later books that were age appropriate for them at different ages and stages. It just became the norm and nothing special. And I've shared with Nina and others before that each of the children believed that it was a bespoke book for their family. So they're really well done. They believe that their parents are in the pictures and the picture of them made it their unique book. So that takes some of the stress out of it, both for the parents and, by implications for the young person. So do it as soon as you're comfortable with. There isn't a magic age, I don't think.
I mean, we would say for Rebecca's reasoning that we want children to never remember a time they didn't know. And so that means really telling them before they're about 6, but that could be starting when they are little babies. It could be starting when they're 2, when they're 4, when parents feel ready. And it's more at that stage, it's more about the parents getting comfortable with the language and to share that story, find a vocabulary that works for you. At a point when the child's not going to ask too many questions, because what you don't want is to sit down with an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old and then suddenly get into a whole discussion. There's the first conversation that you have. So we're trying to avoid that scenario and try and do it earlier. As a kind of make it easier for parents actually, but come to us. We've got all the resources. We've got workshops, books, support groups, everything.
Would someone conceived outside of the UK by a foreign sperm bank such as Cryos or European Sperm Bank be allowed to check with the HFEA if they have half siblings in the UK?
Because they wouldn't be on the register, we wouldn't be able to check the details and the donor code. So no, they wouldn't be able to apply to the HFEA.
When sperm from Cryos has been used, there can be potentially great numbers of half siblings in many countries as Cryos exports sperm worldwide.
We are a UK regulator and we have absolutely no jurisdiction outside of the UK. So we can only regulate what happens within in the UK. So currently we have a 10 family limit for any sperm that's been imported to be used within the UK, but it can be used multiple times, one donor all over the world. And we can't have we've got no regulatory powers over that at all. So it's important for clinics to discuss this with any patients that are choosing to use sperm from overseas, so they really understand the implications. This is when implications counselling, as we've mentioned, is so important to think through what the implications for any child if they have got hundreds of half siblings all over the world. So it's something that we are aware of, and we want to make sure the right information is given to patients purchasing sperm from outside the UK, but it's not something as a regulator that we can stop or prevent. Some banks do have restricted numbers of families that they're using a donor for, and that's something to definitely discuss with your clinic, and when you're selecting a donor, really think carefully about.
Can DC siblings only make connections with other DC siblings who've contacted the HFEA sibling register, or is everyone who is DC listed on that register?
No, it is only people that apply to go on the donor sibling link that then will be able to find out their siblings. So it may be that somebody knows that their donor conceived, finds out information, but decides not to go on the donor sibling link.
As a donor embryo conceived person, I was very pleased to hear about the Who's Your Donor campaign, raising awareness of a new cohort of donor conceived people being able to find their donors, as I'm in my mid-20s and not able to access identifying information about my donors. I feel it was a missed opportunity to educate the public that pre-2005 donors can re-register and remove their anonymity.
We have had people already start to inquire about removing their anonymity, and as the campaign goes on, whether that's egg, sperm or embryo donors, that will be part of it, to encourage people to come forward to re-register if they want to.
I've been in situations where donors have been used to create more than 10 families lawfully under the code of practice, but find it hard to find information on how this happens. Do the HFEA record how many breaches there've been and what happens in these situations? Does the donor know that maybe 11 or 12 families have been created?
We are aware that there has been some breaches. They tend to be more historical than now. There is going to be some communication about this. I think it might be next month or the month after in Clinic Focus, because we're going to have a new registered tool which enables us to get this information, and for clinics to access this information a lot easier. So yeah, keep an eye on Clinic Focus and there'll be some communications about that.